Welcome again to our tiki hut in South Florida. Another breezy day, and I need a haircut, so please excuse me as I brush my hair aside. This is a short video to respond to some comments that were pretty good on my first video. If you recall, my first video I made in order to provide my opinions and thoughts to the world, hopefully that a Canadian or two might see it, that might end up going into some process or workflow or think tank that could result in maybe negotiations being better between Canada and the United States. So here's the recap of the first video. I was disappointed in the Ronald Reagan words being used for what I call a fake advertisement regarding tariffs. Second thing was the trade deficit. Third was the fact that President Trump had stated that illegal immigration and illegal drugs coming into the United States were a big part of the reason for the tariffs to begin with. Then there was the complaint I had about, and other people had, with regard to the fact that the Canadians put tariffs on some CUSMA treaty items, which we had never done, so they retracted those, but that pokes the bear, as I said. So let's go over the brilliant comments that people made, and I mean brilliant for real. Brilliant to me is something that I didn't know about, and yet somebody brought up. So the first one was on the trade deficit with regards to my statement about it being $45 billion US, and other people brought up services. So I looked into it, and yes, there is a services trade deficit in the reverse direction. But putting the two trade deficit together, the overall trade deficit is still $30 billion plus, 30 billion US dollars between Canada and the United States. So that's that one. Second thing is border protection. Well, that's my way of putting together three things now. Illegal immigration, illegal drugs coming from Canada into the United States, and illegal guns coming from the United States into Canada. That was a good comment. So I researched that. What I found was that, at least it appears to me, that all the guns coming into Canada from the United States are being brought in by Canadians. Yes, I'm sure they're buying them from criminals from some other location or from Americans, but they're being brought in by Canadians. Having said that, it's all part of border security. I agree with that. So, given the fact that Canada has 1.3% of their GDP being spent in military right now, and the old rule was 2%, that was disappointing, but the new rule is 5%, 3.5% in real military and 1.5% in military style infrastructure. I think that Canada could go a long ways with improving its relationship with the United States, and the United States could obviously improve its border protection with Canada by us working together. We don't want to harm the trade between our two countries by, for example, stopping all driving of trucks across the border. We want to improve the protection of both countries from the other one, illegal activities. So, improve border protection. And I learned three things about Canada during the making of these two videos. The first one was, yes, Ontario has a capital in Toronto. I thought it was Ottawa, where the Canadian capital was. Having said that, a second thing I learned was about the Canadian Rangers. Your Ranger organization appears to be a wonderful organization which could be leveraged. And I don't mean by giving them more work to do, I mean by doubling them. If you increase your Ranger organization by another 5,000 people and use them along the border, because most of our border is indeed not well populated, then that would be possibly, from my perspective, a wonderful solution to assisting in border protection. And it could be considered part of your 3.5% military expenditure. So better border protection could be the basis of our discussions between the two countries, and Rangers could be a possible solution for Canadians that would solve two problems. One, increased military expenditure, and two, improved border protection. I realize that a lot of fencing will have to be built and maintained. A lot of good drones, a lot of good electronics would go a long ways to reducing criminal activities. And also have to remember tunnels. That's a big deal. And then the last thing was tariffs. I am not an expert on dairy. I'm not an expert on tariffs. I do know that if you raise tariffs up well above a few percent, you basically are saying no thank you to the import of that item. I know that there's all kinds of issues with regard to wanting to protect dairy farmers in both countries. I've got no problem with that. I like having local farms protected. So that could also be a strong basis for why the two countries can work together in negotiations. The comments I got on tariffs was that that nobody's been paying those tariffs. Well, of course nobody's been paying 248% tariffs. It'd be cheaper to bring milk from Newfoundland into Vancouver, British Columbia than it would be to bring milk from any place in the United States across the border into Vancouver. So basically saying 248% is saying no import of any kind. Why don't we just say that when we negotiate, you know? Quite honestly, having 248% tariffs on either side seems ridiculous to me. So, what's the third thing I learned about Canada? Third thing was I learned about Mary's Harbor up in Newfoundland. Well, item number 4 that I learned, it's really in Labrador. I watched a really neat video clip about the mayor / fisherman, the Honorable Mr. Alton Rumbold, up in Mary's Harbor, and I put that on my bucket list. I've always wanted to go to Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. I know that's not part of Canada. I know that's France. But while I'm up there, I might as well go to Mary's Harbor. I'd like to meet that mayor. And before I take off, there were some comments also with regard to us having never successfully invaded Canada. Well, I agree. We never did successfully invade Canada. I do remember, however, something pertinent to this video, the Peace Tower. Actually, it's called the Perry's Victory and International Peace Memorial, located on South Bass Island in Put-in Bay on the Lake Erie Islands. That Peace Tower was built, I think, 100 years after the Battle of Lake Erie. We need to remember that Peace Tower. You heard some planes? Yes. Les Canadiens have returned to South Florida, and it's time for me to go. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this. If you have any other comments, brilliant or otherwise, I'd be happy to read them, and I will respond. Unless somebody comes up with a brilliant reason for me to make a third video about U.S.-Canada relations, this will be it. But please don't hesitate to watch some of my other videos. I do a weekly video with regard to 2026 elections. I think it's vitally important for the future of our country that the Republicans retain control of both the House and the Senate. And I also think that the majority should be expanded. So I do a weekly video on that and what I call my Hungry Strike for America. Yes, I chose to lose 50 pounds starting about 3 or 4 months ago. Done a video each week. Most weeks I've lost a pound. My goal is to lose the 50 pounds, and I say 50 pounds because we have 50 states. Also gets me to a healthy weight. 50 pounds by the end of October of 2026, because election day will be in November. So if you want to watch me do some interesting discussions with regard to a non-political American talking reality about the 2026 elections and my attempt to lose weight to get down to 50 pounds less than when I started, please don't hesitate to watch those videos on the Honor and Knowledge channel. Thank you very much again. God bless Canada. God bless the United States of America. And I was going to put out this video on Sunday, but since the World Series ended Saturday night, I did not feel like saying anything about Canada or the United States. Too bad. Couldn't be a tie.